Hey guys, tonight we begin with something gritty, grand, and absolutely unforgiving. Life in the Viking Age, not as a ruler, not as a warrior, but as the human fuel that powered their entire world, a slave. Tonight, you're not a hero with a horned helmet. You're property with a pulse, chained, abused, and thrown away like garbage, all before breakfast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey. Together. You are dreaming of home, the scent of wood smoke from your father's hearth, the taste of fresh-baked bread, the sound of your sister humming a tune as she mends a fishing net. It's a gentle world, a soft world, one where the biggest worry is a poor harvest or a storm on the coast. You feel safe, warm, loved. Then, the dream shatters, not gently, but violently. The first sound is a scream, thin and sharp, cutting through the morning mist. It's followed by another, then a chorus. You bolt upright, the straw of your mattress scratching your skin. The air is wrong. It smells of salt, yes, but also of fire. Thick, acrid smoke curls under your door, tasting of burning thatch and terror. You stumble outside, and your soft world ends. They are already here. Dragons, but not of myth. Their longships, with snarling carved prows, are beached on the shore like great sea beasts come to devour your village. And from them pour men, huge men, bearded and wild-eyed, draped in furs and leather, their faces painted with grim purpose. They move not with the clumsy chaos of a brawl, but with the terrifying efficiency of predators. An axe bites into your neighbor's door, splintering it like kindling. A shield wall forms, a living, breathing creature of wood and steel, pushing your village men back, until they fall under a hail of blows. This isn't a battle, it's a harvest. The Vikings aren't here to conquer your land. They're here to reap its most valuable crop. They don't see people. They see livestock. They see walking gold. They see thralls. A hand, hard as stone, grabs your arm. You struggle. You scream. But it's like fighting a tidal wave. The man holding you doesn't even flinch. His eyes are cold, grey like a winter sea, and they look through you, not at you. You are no longer a person. You are cargo. Around you, your world is dying. The village burns. The old and the sick are cut down where they stand. Not out of cruelty, but out of practicality. They aren't worth the space in the longship. The young and strong, the women and children, are herded together, their hands bound with rough leather thongs. You see your mother, her face a mask of disbelief and horror, being shoved toward the ships. You see your brother, his pride broken, being clubbed to the ground. You are now part of a weeping, shuffling column of human misery, forced toward the very beasts that brought this doom to your shore. The dream of home is gone. replaced by the nightmare of a Viking raid. Welcome to your new life. It's about to get much, much worse. The raid was the fire, but the capture is the ice that freezes your soul. You are no longer you. Your name, your family, your history, all of it has been erased in the space of a single, blood-soaked morning. Now, you are a thrall, the old Norse word for slave, and it's a label that sticks to you heavier than the mud on your bare feet. You are property, and property doesn't have a name unless its owner gives it one, which is unlikely. You are now boy, girl, you, there, or simply ignored. The Vikings who captured you move with a chilling indifference. They check your teeth like you're a horse, feel your arms for muscle, look at your body with the calculating gaze of a butcher sizing up a side of meat. A woman who is too defiant is struck. A man who struggles too hard is knocked unconscious and dragged. Your value is measured in your ability to work, your strength, your youth, and for the women, your potential to bear children or serve other needs. There is no negotiation, no plea for mercy that they will understand or care to listen to. You are surrounded by the sounds of a language that sounds like rocks grinding together, harsh and guttural. Their laughter is loud and booming, but it holds no warmth. It's the sound of men who have just made a great profit. You are herded with the other captives onto the long ship. The snarling dragonhead on the prow, once a terrifying symbol from a distance, is now your new reality. You are pushed into the open hull, forced to sit on the hard, cold planks among coils of rope, chests of looted goods, and the stench of your own fear. There are no comforts, no shelter from the spray of the sea or the lash of the wind. You are chained, not always with iron, but with the certainty of your fate. To run would be to drown. To fight would be to die. You look back at the shore, at the pillar of smoke that was once your home, and a part of you dies with it. The Vikings unfurl a great square sail, striped in red and white. It catches the wind, and the longship pulls away from the land you knew, slicing through the waves with a predatory grace. You are leaving everything behind, heading into a future you cannot imagine, controlled by men who see you as less than human. The sea is vast and cold, and you are utterly, terrifyingly alone, even as you are pressed shoulder to shoulder with the other broken souls who share your fate. This is the moment your life splits in two, the person you were and the thing you are about to become. The journey by sea is not an adventure. It's a new layer of hell. The Viking longship, a marvel of engineering and a symbol of their power, is for you, a floating prison designed for maximum misery. You are crammed into the open hull, exposed to the elements without reprieve. The North Sea is a cruel mistress, and she does not care that you are not a sailor. The ship pitches and rolls with a relentless, nauseating rhythm. Salt spray, icy and stinging, lashes your face and soaks your thin tunic, chilling you to the bone. There is no shelter. When it rains, you are drenched. When the sun beats down, you bake. When the wind howls, it cuts through you like a blade. Seasickness is rampant. The deck is slick with vomit, seawater, and filth. The Vikings, seasoned sailors, step around it with practiced ease, their sea legs steady. You, however, are a wreck, your stomach heaving with every swell of the waves. You are given no special consideration. Your food, if you get any, is a chunk of hard, stale bread and a sip of murky water from a barrel. It's just enough to keep you alive, because dead cargo is worthless. You are chained or bound, especially at night, to prevent any desperate attempts at escape. You sleep, if you can call it that, on the hard, wet planks, your body aching from the cold and the unnatural motion of the ship. The stench is overwhelming. It's a symphony of unwashed bodies, stale food, bilge water, and the ever-present smell of the sea, which no longer smells of freedom, but of despair. The Vikings themselves are a constant presence of menace. They eat, they drink, they sing their loud, booming songs of battles and gods you don't know. They sharpen their axes, mend their sails, and gamble with the very trinkets they stole from your home. They ignore you most of the time, but their casual brutality is always simmering just beneath the surface. A thrall who is too slow, too loud, or simply in the way might receive a kick or a cuff without a second thought. You learn to make yourself small, to be invisible, to become a piece of the ship's architecture. You watch the grey, endless sea and the grey, endless sky, and you lose track of days. Time blurs into a cycle of shivering, hunger, and fear. You are no longer just a captive. You are being broken, stripped of your humanity by the sheer, grinding misery of the voyage. The journey is designed to do more than transport you. It is designed to erase you, to deliver a compliant, terrified piece of property to the shores of a new and terrible world. After an eternity of salt and suffering, the longship finally scrapes against a foreign shore. But this is no deliverance. This is the market. You have arrived in a bustling Viking trading town, a place like Horde or Birka. It is a chaotic, sprawling hub of activity, a riot of languages, smells, and sights that are alien and terrifying. The town is a maze of wooden buildings, muddy streets, and rough-looking people from every corner of the known world. You see Arab merchants in flowing robes, Frankish traders with their fine cloth, and everywhere, the towering, bearded Northmen who are now your masters. You and the other captives are dragged from the ship and herded into a pen, like the sheep or cattle you see being traded nearby. This is the slave market, and the next phase of your humiliation is about to begin. You are stripped of your tattered, sea-stained clothes. Naked, shivering and exposed, you are put on display for potential buyers. They walk past, their eyes appraising you with a cold, calculating detachment. They are not looking at a person, they are inspecting a product. A man with a scarred face and a heavy gold ring on his finger forces your mouth open to check your teeth. A woman with sharp, knowing eyes pokes at your arms and legs, testing your muscle tone. They are assessing your worth, your potential for hard labor, your health, and your likelihood of survival. You are asked to walk, to turn, to show that you have no hidden injuries or deformities. Any sign of weakness, illness, or defiance drastically lowers your price. You hear the Vikings haggling, their voices loud and argumentative, bartering over your life in a language you don't understand. The currency isn't just coin. You might be traded for a pile of silver arm rings, a bolt of silk from the east, a fine sword, or a handful of walrus tusks. Your life has been given a price tag, and it's shockingly low. The fear is palpable. Families captured together are now sold separately. You watch a mother being torn away from her child, her screams ignored as the boy is sold to a different master. You see brothers separated, their last shared glance one of utter despair. You are powerless to stop it. You are powerless to do anything but stand there and pray to gods who seem very, very far away. Then it's your turn. A deal is struck. A hand is shaken. A purse of silver changes hands. You have a new master. You don't know who he is, where you are going, or what your fate will be. You are just a thrall, a piece of property, and you have been sold. Your new master is a man named Bjorn, or maybe Hrolf, or something equally harsh sounding. It doesn't matter. To you, he is simply master. He is a carl, a free farmer, not a wealthy jarl, but a man of some standing. He owns a small farmstead, a few cows, and now, you. He leads you away from the chaotic market, through the muddy streets of the town and into the vast, windswept landscape of his homeland. It is a beautiful country, in a stark, unforgiving way. Rolling hills, deep fjords, and dark, brooding forests. But you see none of its beauty. All you see is a cage without walls. You arrive at his longhouse. It is a long, low building made of dark timber and turf, with a thatched roof that seems to sag in the middle. Smoke curls from a hole in the roof, and the air around it smells of wood smoke, livestock, and something vaguely like boiled cabbage. This is your new home, and your new prison. Inside, it is dark and smoky. A long central fire pit dominates the room, casting flickering shadows on the wooden walls. The floor is packed earth, and the air is thick with the smells of unwashed bodies, drying herbs, and the animals that are often brought inside during the harsh winters. Benches line the walls, covered in furs, where the family eats and sleeps. There is no privacy, no separate rooms. Everything happens in this one, large communal space. You are introduced to the household. There is your master's wife, a stern-faced woman who looks at you not with pity, but with the weary eyes of someone who now has one more mouth to feed and one more body to manage. There are his children, who stare at you with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. You are a novelty, a toy, a thing. And then there are the other slaves. Maybe one or two others, their faces etched with the same resigned emptiness you feel growing in your own soul. They don't meet your eye. They know the rules. You are at the absolute bottom of this new world. Your place is on the floor, near the animals. Your bed is a pile of straw, if you're lucky. Your purpose is to serve, to obey, to work until you drop, and to never, ever forget your place. Your life as a person is over. Your life as a tool has just begun. The longhouse, with its warmth and its fire, should feel like a shelter. But to you, it feels like a tomb. The sun rises, and your new life of labor begins. There is no orientation, no training manual, no Viking HR department to ease you into your role. Your master points, he grunts, and you are expected to understand. If you are a male slave, your life is now an endless cycle of backbreaking physical work, from sunup to sundown, in a climate that is as unforgiving as your owner. Your first task is likely in the fields. The soil is rocky and hard. You are handed a crude wooden plough or a heavy iron hoe. You are to till the land, sow the barley and oats, and pull the weeds. The work is relentless. Your hands, once soft, are now blistered, then calloused, then cracked and bleeding. Your back aches with a fire that never goes out. The Scandinavian summer is short, and the workload is immense. Everything must be done in the few months of light and relative warmth. You work alongside the free farmers, but you are not one of them. They take breaks, they drink ale, they joke with one another. You work. If you slow down, you get a sharp word or a sharper kick. You are also responsible for the livestock. You muck out the stalls, you haul water for the cattle, you herd the sheep across the rocky hillsides. always wary of wolves. It's lonely, isolating work. Then there is the endless task of chopping wood. The winters here are brutal, and a massive supply of firewood is essential for survival. You spend days in the forest, felling trees with a heavy axe, splitting logs, and hauling them back to the longhouse. Every muscle in your body screams in protest. You're also the builder, the repairman, the hauler of stones for a new wall, the digger of ditches for drainage. You are the all-purpose beast of burden. Your diet is meagre: a bowl of thin porridge, a piece of hard bread, the scraps left over from the master's table. It is not enough to fuel the work you are forced to do. You are perpetually tired, perpetually hungry, perpetually sore. And there is no respite. There are no weekends, no holidays for you. A festival for the family means more work for you, preparing for the feast, cleaning up after. Your life is measured not in days, but in tasks completed. And the only reward for finishing one task is being given another, even harder one. You are a machine made of flesh and bone, and you will be worked until you break. If you are a female slave, your prison is not the open field, but the smoky confines of the longhouse. Your labor is just as relentless, but it is a different kind of grueling. Your world is one of fire, flour, and the endless repetitive tasks that keep the household running. Your day begins before anyone else is awake. You are the one who rekindles the central fire, your face stinging from the smoke that fills the dark longhouse. You then begin the first of many soul-crushing chores: grinding grain. You spend hours on your knees, pushing a heavy stone back and forth over a stone slab, turning coarse barley or rye into flour. It is a physically demanding, monotonous task that grinds down your spirit as much as it does the grain. Your hands become raw, your back and shoulders ache, but you cannot stop. The family needs bread. You are also the water carrier. Multiple times a day, you must haul heavy wooden buckets of water from the well or a nearby stream. In winter, this means trekking through snow and ice, your fingers numb with cold. You cook. You are not a chef creating fine meals. You are a menial labourer, stirring a large cauldron of porridge or stew over the open fire. A simple, bland mixture that will feed the family and the other farm hands. You bake the bread you ground, you churn the butter, you salt the meat for preservation. You serve the meals, but you eat last, and you eat the least. The scraps, the leftovers, the burnt bits, that is your portion. Your life is also a constant cycle of cleaning. You sweep the packed earth floor, you scrub the wooden benches, you clean the cooking pots with sand and water. You are responsible for the wool. You wash it, you card it, you spin it into thread, and then you spend countless hours at the loom, weaving the coarse, heavy cloth that will become the family's tunics and cloaks. It is intricate, painstaking work, and a single mistake can earn you a harsh word or a blow. And then there is the ever-present danger that is unique to female slaves. You are sexually vulnerable. Your master, his sons, or even his guests can use your body as they see fit. There is no concept of consent. You are property. Rape is not a crime. It is an owner's right. The children you might bear from such assaults are also slaves belonging to your master. You live in a state of constant, quiet terror, knowing that your body is not your own. Your work never ends. You are the first to rise and the last to sleep. Your existence is a blur of domestic drudgery, physical exhaustion, and the silent, gnawing fear of violation. You are always hungry. It's a dull, constant ache in the pit of your stomach, a reminder of your status that is as real as the leather thong around your wrist. In the Viking world, food is a direct measure of your worth, and as a thrall, you're worth very little. You watch your master's family feast. You see the steam rising from a haunch of roasted pork, glistening with fat. You smell the rich aroma of a stew made with fresh vegetables, herbs, and chunks of beef. You see them tear into warm, soft bread, slathered with butter, and wash it down with mugs of frothing ale or sweet, golden mead. Their meals are social events, filled with laughter, storytelling, and the boasting of warriors. They eat until they are full, until they are content, and they throw the bones and scraps onto the floor for the dogs. And for you, your meal comes after they are finished. It is a collection of what is left over, what is deemed unfit for the family. You might get a wooden bowl of thin, watery gruel, a porridge made from oats or barley, often unsalted and bland. You might get the heel of the stale bread, hard as a rock, which you have to gnaw on like a dog. Sometimes you get the trimmings from the meat, the gristle, the fat, the bits that are too tough or too unappetizing for your owners. Fish is common, especially dried or salted cod, but you get the heads and the tails, not the fleshy middle. Foraged foods are a supplement. You might gather berries, nuts, and roots from the forest, but this is done on top of your regular duties, not instead of them. In the harshest months of winter, food becomes even scarcer. The family eats from their preserved stores of salted meat and dried grains. You eat less. Your rations are cut. The hunger becomes sharper, a cold, biting thing that makes it hard to sleep and even harder to work. Malnutrition is a constant companion. Your body is weak, your immune system compromised. A simple illness that a well-fed person could fight off can be a death sentence for you. You are a disposable resource, and keeping you well-fed is not a priority. It is cheaper to work you to death and buy a new slave than it is to share a leg of lamb. The ultimate cruelty is that you are often the one who prepares the food. You spend your day cooking the delicious-smelling meals, your own stomach rumbling, knowing that you will not get to taste them. The aroma of roasting meat is not a promise. It is a taunt. It is a constant, fragrant reminder of everything you are not, everything you do not have, and everything you will never be. Your body is not your own, and neither are the clothes on your back. While your master and his family wear clothes of dyed wool, trimmed with fur and fastened with ornate brooches, you are given the bare minimum required to cover yourself and prevent you from freezing to death in the winter. Your entire wardrobe consists of a single garment, a simple, undyed tunic. It is made from coarse, scratchy wool or rough linen, the kind of fabric that chafes your skin and never feels soft. It is likely a hand-me-down, worn and patched, previously belonging to another slave or a low-ranking farmhand. It is a drab, greyish-brown colour, the natural shade of the wool, because expensive dyes like red, blue, or green are reserved for the free. This one tunic is your work uniform, your sleepwear, and your only protection against the elements. You wear it day in and day out, until it is stiff with dirt, sweat, and grime. Laundry is a rare luxury. When you do get a chance to wash it, you do so in a cold stream, beating it against rocks, with no soap. It never feels truly clean. In the summer, the heavy wool is suffocating. In the winter, it is woefully inadequate against the biting Scandinavian winds. You have no cloak, no leggings, no shoes. You are barefoot, always. Your feet are calloused, cracked, and perpetually sore from walking on rough ground, sharp stones, and frozen earth. Frostbite is a constant threat in winter. A small cut on your foot can easily become infected, leading to a fever that could kill you. Your shelter is no better than your clothing. You do not have a bed. You do not have a room. You do not even have a designated corner. You sleep on the floor of the longhouse, on a pile of loose straw, often near the animals who are brought inside for warmth. The straw is infested with fleas and lice, which quickly make a home in your hair and your tunic. You are never free from the itching. The floor is cold, damp, and dirty. You share your sleeping space with the dogs, the chickens, and sometimes, if the winter is particularly harsh, the cattle. The smell is thick and cloying. The sounds are a constant symphony of snoring humans, snuffling animals, and the scuttling of rats in the thatch above. There's no escape, no moment of peace or privacy. You are a living part of the farm's infrastructure, treated with the same level of care as a piece of equipment or an animal. Your body is a tool to be used, and your comfort is an irrelevant, unconsidered concept. You are clothed in rags and sheltered by filth, a constant, physical reminder of your worthlessness in this new world. In the eyes of the Viking world, you are not a person. You are an object. This is not a metaphor. It is a legal reality. As a thrall, you exist outside the complex system of laws, honor, and kinship that governs Norse society. You are, quite literally, property, and your master holds the power of life and death over you. The law for a free man, a carl, is based on a system of fines and retribution. If a carl injures another, he pays a fine, a vergild, a man price. The amount depends on the injury and the status of the victim. But you have no vergild. If another free man injures or kills you, he does not answer to the law. He answers to your master. He has not committed a crime against a person. He has damaged property. He will pay your master for the loss of a valuable tool, the same way he would pay for killing his neighbor's ox. Your master can do whatever he wants to you. He can beat you for a minor mistake, for being too slow, or for no reason at all. He can brand you, maim you, or use you for his sexual gratification. None of these actions are illegal. They are simply an owner exercising his rights. The only thing he cannot legally do is kill you without cause, and cause is a very flexible term. If he decides you are lazy, defiant, or simply no longer useful, he can kill you with no legal repercussions. No one will investigate, no one will care, you will simply disappear. You cannot own property, you cannot marry without your master's permission. Any children you have are born into slavery and belong to your master, even if he is the father. You cannot testify at the thing, the local assembly where laws are made and disputes are settled. Your voice has no legal standing. You are a ghost in the system, a non-entity whose existence is defined entirely by a utility to someone else. This legal and social dehumanization is the most profound and soul-crushing aspect of your existence. You are not just unfree, you are unpersoned. The very concept of justice does not apply to you. The gods they worship, the honor they cherish, the laws they uphold, none of it is for you. You are a shadow, a tool, a thing to be used and discarded. This is the cold, hard truth of your life as a thrall in the Viking age. Your body is a canvas of pain, your mind a fortress under siege. The physical hardship is relentless, but it's the psychological warfare of slavery that truly hollows you out. Hope is a dangerous currency, one you can no longer afford to trade in. The memories of your past life, once a source of comfort, now feel like daggers. You remember the face of your mother, the warmth of your home, the freedom of walking down a path of your own choosing. These memories are a constant, agonizing reminder of everything you have lost. To survive, you must learn to kill them, to bury them deep inside you where they cannot hurt you anymore. But they always find a way to surface in a snatch of a song you overhear, in the way the sunlight hits a field, and the grief is as sharp and fresh as the day you were captured. Despair is your constant companion. It sits on your chest when you wake. It walks with you through the fields, and it lies with you on your bed of straw at night. You watch the free people, your masters, and you see a world you can never be a part of. They laugh, they love, they argue, they dream. You exist. Your emotional landscape flattens into a barren plain of resignation. Joy is a foreign country. Laughter is a sound that belongs to others. Fear, however, is ever present. You fear your master's temper, the cold of the coming winter, the hunger that gnaws at your belly. You fear illness, knowing there will be no care for you. You fear being sold again to a crueler master in a more distant land. This constant, low-level terror becomes the background noise of your life. Are there moments of kindness? Perhaps. A master's wife might give you an extra piece of bread. A child might smile at you without contempt. But these moments are rare and unreliable. They are not signs of affection. They are often just flickers of indifference, a brief forgetting of your status. To mistake them for hope is a fool's errand. You learn to read your masters, to anticipate their moods, to become a master of silent obedience. You learn to be invisible, to move through the longhouse and the farmstead without drawing attention. Your spirit, once vibrant, begins to shrink. You build walls around your heart, not to keep others out, but to keep what little is left of yourself safe inside. You might find a sliver of solidarity with the other thralls, a shared glance of understanding, a silent acknowledgement of your shared suffering. But even this is fraught with danger. Trust is a luxury. A fellow slave could betray you to gain favor with the master. The system is designed to keep you isolated, to break your bonds with everyone, including yourself. The greatest battle you fight is not in the fields with a hoe, but in the quiet of your own mind. The battle to remember that you were once a person, even as the world around you screams that you are not. The thought of escape is a flickering flame in the darkest corner of your mind. It is a dangerous, seductive whisper that promises freedom, but will most likely deliver a horrific death. But sometimes, the despair becomes so great that even the slimmest chance of freedom seems worth the risk. What happens if you try to run? First, you must understand the landscape. This is not your home. The forests are dark and unfamiliar. The mountains are treacherous. The fjords are a maze of icy water. You do not know the paths, the safe places to hide, or where to find food. The very land is your enemy. And where would you go? Your home is an ocean away. The nearest towns are filled with people who would recognize you as a runaway thrall in an instant. A lone stranger, dirty, emaciated, and speaking with a foreign accent, is not an object of pity. They are an object of suspicion. Anyone who finds you would be legally obligated to return you to your master. Helping a runaway slave is a crime. But the biggest obstacle is not the geography. It is the culture. Norse society is built on a tight-knit system of kinship and community. Everyone knows everyone. A stranger is noticed immediately. There is no anonymity. If you are caught, and you almost certainly will be, the punishment is designed not just to hurt you, but to serve as a terrifying example to the other slaves. You will be brought back in chains, shamed and beaten in front of the entire household. Your master, his honor slighted by your defiance, will make an example of you. You could be flogged until your back is a raw, bleeding mess. You could have your Achilles tendon cut, ensuring you will never run again. You could be branded on the face with a hot iron, a permanent mark of your status as a disobedient thrall. Or your master could simply kill you. A public, brutal execution would send a clear message to the other slaves. This is the price of hope. The sagas are filled with grim tales of runaway thralls being hunted down and killed. Even fighting back is a death sentence. If you were to strike your master, even in self-defense, you would be killed on the spot. There is no trial, no mercy. Resistance, in any form, is an act of suicide. So, the flame of hope flickers, but it rarely catches fire. You learn that the only way to survive is to submit, to crush that instinct for freedom, to accept the crushing weight of your reality. The cage may be vast and made of mountains and sea, but it is a cage nonetheless, and there is no escape. For a female slave, there is a particular path that is both a potential elevation and a unique form of damnation, becoming a concubine, a friller. This is not a choice you make. It is a fate assigned to you. If you are young, healthy, and considered attractive by your master, he may decide to take you into his bed on a permanent basis. This is not seen as an affair or an act of love. It is simply another way an owner can utilize his property. In some ways, your life might improve. You may be moved from the straw on the floor to a slightly better sleeping space within the longhouse. You might receive better food, not the feasts of the family, but perhaps more than just the scraps. You might be given a slightly better tunic. These are not gifts. They are investments in a valuable asset. Your primary role is to provide sexual service to your master whenever he desires it. But your role may also expand. You become a part of the household in a more intimate and therefore more dangerous way. You are now in direct proximity to the master's wife. She is the legal spouse, the mistress of the household, and she likely views you with a mixture of contempt, jealousy, and suspicion. You are a constant living reminder of her husband's infidelity, even though it is his right. Her cruelty towards you might be subtle, extra chores, public shaming, or it could be overt and violent. You must navigate this treacherous domestic landscape with extreme care. Any children you bear by your master are a complex issue. Legally, they are born slaves, the property of your master, just like you. However, a son born to a friller could, in some circumstances, be acknowledged by his father. He would never have the same status as a legitimate heir, but he might be raised as a free man, albeit a lower-ranking one. This gives you a sliver of potential influence. Your son's fate is tied to your master's whim. This creates a strange, precarious position for you. You are still a slave, but you are also the mother of a potentially free child. You are both powerless and holding a fragile piece of the future in your hands. But do not mistake this for security. Your position is entirely dependent on your master's favor. If he tires of you, grows old, or if his wife's pressure becomes too much, you can be cast aside in an instant. You could be sold, given away, or returned to the drudgery of a common field thrall. The life of a friller is a life lived on a knife's edge. You may have a slightly softer bed and a little more to eat, but you have even less control over your own body and your own fate. You are a tool for pleasure and reproduction, and like any tool, you can be discarded when you are no longer useful. In a world defined by chains and servitude, the idea of freedom is the most potent and elusive of dreams. For a thrall, it is a near impossibility, a myth whispered in the dark. But it did happen. The process was called manumission, and it was the only ladder out of the pit of slavery. How could you be freed? It was never a right. It was always a gift, granted solely at your master's discretion. The most common path was to buy your own freedom. This sounds like a contradiction. How can property earn money? Some thralls, particularly those with specialized skills like blacksmithing, carpentry, or even skaldic poetry, might be allowed to work for others and keep a tiny fraction of the earnings. Over a lifetime of painstaking work and saving, it was theoretically possible to accumulate enough silver to purchase your own life from your master. It was an arduous, near impossible task, requiring immense luck and a master who was willing to play along. Another path was through a master's will. A dying owner, perhaps in a moment of piety or sentimentality, might grant freedom to a loyal, long-serving slave in his final testament. This was more common for household thralls or frillers who had been with a family for decades. It was a final act of charity, a way to secure one's own legacy as a generous master. Freedom could also be granted as a reward for an extraordinary act of service, such as saving your master's life in a raid or showing exceptional loyalty during a feud. But these were the stuff of sagas, not everyday reality. So, let's say the impossible happens. You are freed. You are now a Leisingi, a freedman. Are you now an equal? Absolutely not. You are no longer property, but you are far from being a free carl. Your former master is now your patron. You owe him loyalty and support for the rest of your life. You cannot move away or take up arms against his family. You are still tied to him by a bond of obligation. You have more legal rights. You can own a small amount of property. You can marry freely, but you are still a second-class citizen. You cannot hold high office. You cannot speak with authority at the thing. Your children will inherit this status. It would take generations for your family's slave-born taint to wash away completely. Freedom for a Viking Age thrall was not a clean break. It was a step up from property to person, but you remained a person living in the shadow of your former chains. It was a partial, conditional freedom, a constant reminder that while you were no longer owned, you would never truly belong. There are fates worse than a lifetime of labour. There are fates worse than hunger and cold. In the world of the Vikings, the darkest end for a thrall was not to be worked to death, but to be chosen as a companion for the dead. Human sacrifice, while not a daily occurrence, was a real and terrifying part of Norse ritual, particularly in the funerals of high-ranking jarls and chieftains. When a great leader died, his journey to the afterlife was not to be made alone. He needed servants, companions, and status symbols to accompany him into the next world. His finest horses, his dogs, his weapons, and his treasures were all placed in his burial mound or on his funeral ship. And sometimes, so were his slaves. If you were a thrall in the household of a powerful chieftain who had just died, a cold dread would settle over you. Who would be chosen to go with him? The choice might be based on loyalty, status, within the household, or simple, cruel chance. The most detailed and horrifying account of such a ritual comes from the Arab traveller Ahmad ibn Fadlan, who witnessed a ship burial for a Rus chieftain in the 10th century. He describes how, after the chieftain's death, one of his slave girls volunteered to be sacrificed. The idea of volunteering is a chilling one. Was it a true choice, born of a belief that she would gain honor in the afterlife? Or was it a coerced decision, where the alternative, a life of continued misery under a new unknown master, seemed even worse? For 10 days, this girl was treated like royalty. She was dressed in the finest clothes, given the best food and drink, and engaged in sexual rituals with the chieftain's men. It was a bizarre, feverish period of celebration before her death. She was, in a way, being prepared, purified, and elevated before being sent to serve her master in the next world. On the day of the funeral, the chieftain was placed on his ship, surrounded by his possessions. Then, the slave girl was led to the ship. She was given a final, intoxicating drink, and, as she sang, she was lifted onto the ship. There, she was held down by men, while an old woman, known as the Angel of Death, stabbed her repeatedly with a dagger, while others strangled her with a rope. The ship was then set ablaze, a floating pyre that would carry the chieftain and his sacrificed servant to the halls of Valhalla. This was not a death. This was a sacrament. To be chosen was, in their eyes, an honor. To you, a thrall watching from the shore, it was the ultimate expression of your worthlessness. Your life was not your own, and even your death could be taken from you, repurposed to serve the ego of a dead man. Let's step out of your chains for a moment and into the sealskin boots of the Viking who put you in them. Who was this man? Was he a monster, a demon born of ice and fury? The truth is more complicated and perhaps more unsettling. To understand the Viking raider, you must understand his world. Scandinavia in the 8th and 9th centuries was a harsh, resource-poor land. Arable land was scarce, and society was rigidly hierarchical. If you weren't the eldest son, you weren't inheriting the family farm. Your options were limited. Become a landless farmhand, or seek your fortune elsewhere. The sea was their highway, and the world beyond it was filled with riches, ripe for the taking. Monasteries in England and Ireland, undefended and filled with gold and silver chalices, were not seen as sacred places. They were seen as poorly guarded banks. The slave trade was not an act of pure evil. It was the engine of their economy. Thralls were the single most valuable commodity. They worked the farms, built the ships, and were traded for the silver, silk, and spices that brought wealth and status back home. A successful raid that brought back a dozen healthy slaves could set a man up for life. It could allow him to buy his own farm, attract a wife, and gain the respect of his community. Raiding wasn't just about wealth, it was about honor. In Norse society, a man's reputation, his drama, was everything. It was built through deeds, not words. A young man proved his worth not by staying home, but by going Viking, literally, on a raid. To return with treasure and stories of battle was to earn a place in the sagas. and a seat in the Great Hall. Their religion fueled this ambition. The promise of Valhalla, the Great Hall where warriors chosen by Odin would feast and fight until the end of time, was a powerful motivator. But only those who died bravely in battle could get there. A peaceful death in bed was a dishonorable one. This worldview didn't just accept violence, it sanctified it. The raider who captured you did not see himself as a villain. In his own eyes, he was an entrepreneur, an adventurer, a man carving his destiny out of a cruel world. He saw you not as a person with a family and a home, but as a resource, a stepping stone on his path to glory. He was likely a product of a brutal system himself, a man for whom violence was a necessary tool for survival and success. This doesn't excuse his actions. It makes them more chilling. He wasn't a monster from another world. He was a man, driven by the same desires for wealth, status, and a better life that drive people today. He just had an axe, a longship, and a moral compass that pointed to a very different north. The engine of the Viking Age was not greed or fury alone. It was a masterpiece of naval architecture, the longship. This vessel was more than a boat. It was a technological marvel, a weapon, and a work of art, all in one. Without it, the raids, the trade, and the exploration that defined the era would have been impossible. What made the longship so revolutionary? First, its design. It was long, narrow, and light, with a shallow draft. This meant it could not only survive the open ocean of the North Atlantic, but could also navigate up shallow rivers, deep into the heart of foreign lands. A longship could appear as if from nowhere, striking a town miles from the coast, and then vanish back down the river before a defence could be mounted. It was the ultimate amphibious assault vehicle. The construction was clinker-built, meaning the hull planks overlapped, creating a flexible and incredibly strong structure. The ship was designed to bend with the waves, not fight them. It moved like a living creature, flexing its wooden muscles against the power of the sea. It was this flexibility that allowed it to withstand the brutal storms of the northern oceans. Propulsion was a hybrid system. A large, square sail made of wool or linen could be raised to catch the wind for long-distance travel. When the wind died, or for manoeuvring in tight spaces, the crew would take to the oars. A typical longship had ports for 16 to 30 pairs of oars, manned by the Vikings themselves. Rowing was not a task for slaves. It was the work of warriors. The rhythm of the oars was the heartbeat of the ship. The iconic feature, of course, was the prow, often carved into the terrifying head of a dragon or a serpent. This was not just decoration, it was psychological warfare. Imagine being a peaceful monk on the coast of England, seeing a fleet of these sea dragons emerging from the morning mist, their snarling heads silhouetted against the rising sun. It was a vision of mythological dread made real. The longship was a self-contained world. The crew ate, slept, and lived in the open hull for weeks on end. There were no cabins, no quarters. Chests for their belongings doubled as rowing benches. It was a hard, cramped existence, but it was efficient. The ship could carry warriors, cargo, horses, and thralls, making it a versatile tool for raiding, trading, and colonization. It was the longship that carried Vikings to Iceland, Greenland, and even North America. It took them down the rivers of Russia to the markets of Constantinople. It was the key that unlocked the world for them, for better and for worse. The Viking warrior is an icon of brutal efficiency. and his tools were a direct reflection of his trade. Forget the horned helmets. That was a 19th century invention. The real Viking arsenal was practical, deadly, and designed for the close, chaotic horror of shield wall combat. The most important piece of equipment was not a weapon, but the shield. It was a large, round wooden shield, often with a metal boss in the center to protect the hand. It was used not just for blocking, but as a weapon itself, to punch, to bash, and to create the impenetrable skjaldborg, or shield wall. In this formation, warriors stood shoulder to shoulder, their shields overlapping, creating a living fortress of wood and steel. To break a shield wall was to break the army. The primary weapon for the average Viking was the spear. It was cheap to make, versatile, and effective. It could be thrown or used for thrusting, keeping enemies at a distance. But the weapon most associated with the Vikings, and for good reason, was the axe. The Viking axe was not the clumsy, two-headed monstrosity of fantasy. It was a light, well-balanced weapon, often with a long handle that could be wielded with one or two hands. It was a tool of terrifying power, capable of splitting a shield, a helmet, or a skull with a single, well-aimed blow. The bearded axe, with its hooked lower edge, could be used to pull away an enemy's shield, leaving them exposed. Swords were the weapons of the wealthy, the jarls, and the successful raiders. A good Viking sword was a status symbol, a work of art, and a deadly weapon. They were double-edged, flexible, and often given names, treated with a reverence usually reserved for family members. To own a sword was to announce your success to the world. And what of the berserkers? Were they real? Yes, but not in the way modern fiction portrays them. Berserkers were elite warriors who, according to the sagas, would enter a trance-like fury in battle. They would bite their shields, howl like animals, and fight with a reckless abandon that terrified their enemies. They were not supernatural, but likely a combination of psychological conditioning, ritual, and possibly the use of hallucinogenic plants. They were the shock troops, the psychological weapon deployed to break an enemy's morale before the real fighting even began. Viking warfare was not about elegant duels. It was about the shield wall, the crush of bodies, the splintering of wood, and the visceral, close quarters work of the axe and the sword. It was brutal, it was effective, and it was the engine that drove their expansion across the known world. Not every Norseman was a seafaring raider. In fact, most were not. The backbone of Viking society was the carl, the free farmer. His life was not one of gold and glory, but of dirt, sweat, and a different, quieter kind of struggle. His battle was not against English monks, but against the harsh Scandinavian climate and the unforgiving land. Your day as a carl begins with the sun, just like the thralls. But the air you breathe is your own. You're not property. You own this small plot of land, this longhouse, these few cows. But you are a servant to the seasons. The Scandinavian growing season is short and intense. In the spring, you are in the fields from dawn till dusk, ploughing the rocky soil with a team of oxen, if you're lucky, or with your own muscle, if you're not. You sow your crops, barley, rye, oats, and vegetables like cabbage and peas. Every seed is a prayer against the coming winter. In the summer, you tend the fields, you fish in the fjords, and you take your livestock to high pastures. You also have to maintain your property. A leaky roof on the longhouse needs rethatching. A broken fence needs mending. A tool needs sharpening. Your work is never done. The autumn is a frantic race against the first frost. It is harvest time. The entire family works in the fields, cutting the grain with iron sickles, bundling it and storing it. A good harvest means survival. A bad harvest means a winter of hunger and possibly death. Winter is the time of darkness and cold. The days are short, the nights long. You spend your time indoors, repairing tools, carving wood, and mending leather. It is a time for storytelling, for huddling around the fire, for conserving your precious resources. It is also a time of anxiety, as you watch your stores of food dwindle. As a free man, you have rights and responsibilities. You are expected to own weapons, at least a spear and a shield, and to answer the call to arms if your local jarl summons you. You attend the thing, the local assembly, where you can voice your opinion, settle disputes, and participate in the law of the land. Your life is not easy. It is a constant grind. You are one bad harvest, one sick cow, or one Viking raid away from ruin. But you are free. You are the master of your own home. You have honor, you have a family, and you have a place in the world. It is a hard life, but it is your life, and in the harsh world of the Vikings, that is a victory in itself. In the smoky, firelit world of the Longhouse, the Jarl is the undisputed king. But the woman who stands beside him, his wife, is no mere consort. She is the queen of her own domain, a figure of immense power, authority, and responsibility. The life of a Jarl's wife is not one of idle luxury. It is one of constant management, strategic thinking, and the quiet wielding of influence. She is the Husfreyja, the lady of the house, and her symbol of power is not a crown, but a set of keys. She wears them at her waist, a visible sign that she controls the household's wealth. She holds the keys to the food stores, the chests of treasure, the locked rooms where valuables are kept. Nothing of value is accessed without her permission. She is the household's chief financial officer, managing resources with a careful hand. She oversees the food production, the farming, the fishing, the preservation of meat and grain. It is her responsibility to ensure there is enough to feed not just her family, but the dozens of warriors, retainers, and thralls who live under her roof. A poorly managed household reflects poorly on her and her husband's honour. Her domain is the infield, the longhouse, and its immediate surroundings, while the Jarl manages the outfield, war, trade, and politics. She manages everything else. She directs the work of the thralls, oversees the weaving of cloth, the making of clothes, and the brewing of ale. The Longhouse is not just a home, it is a bustling centre of production, and she is its director. She is also a diplomat and a social anchor. When guests arrive, whether they are allies, rivals, or traders from distant lands, it is her duty to host them. She presides over the feasts, ensuring the food is plentiful, the mead flows freely, and the social courtesies are observed. Her grace and hospitality can forge alliances as surely as a sword can, and she is a keeper of lineage. She is expected to produce heirs, particularly sons, to continue the family's dynasty. Her children's upbringing, their education in the ways of the Norse, is her responsibility. While she does not fight in the shield wall, her battlefield is the Longhouse, and her weapons are intelligence, management, and a deep understanding of the complex web of kinship and loyalty. Her influence is real. A wise Jarl consults his wife on important matters. her opinion carries weight. In the sagas, we see powerful women who incite their husbands to vengeance, who negotiate treaties, and who hold their own when their honor is challenged. The life of a Jarl's wife is one of power, but it is also one of immense pressure. She lives in a world of violence and uncertainty, where her husband could be killed in a raid at any moment, and she would be left to defend her home and her children. She is a pillar of strength, a manager, a mother, and a strategist, the silent beating heart of the Viking world. To understand the Viking mind, you must first understand their gods, and at the head of their pantheon sits a figure as complex, contradictory, and dangerous as the Vikings themselves, Odin. He is not a benevolent, all-loving father god. He is the all-father, yes, but he is also the god of war, poetry, wisdom, magic, and death. He is a wanderer, a seeker of knowledge, and a master of deceit. Odin is the god of the Jarls, the poets, and the seekers of forbidden knowledge. He is not a comfortable god to worship. He demands sacrifice, not just of animals, but of the self. In one of the most famous myths, Odin hangs himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, in order to gain knowledge of the runes. In another, he sacrifices one of his own eyes in exchange for a drink from the well of Mimir, the well of wisdom. To Odin, no price is too high for knowledge and power. This relentless, self-sacrificing pursuit of wisdom deeply resonated with the Viking ethos. It told them that greatness was not given. It was earned, often through suffering. His connection to war is just as profound. He is not a god of glorious, straightforward battle like Thor. Odin is a strategist, a god of the fury and madness of combat. The berserkers, who fought in a trance-like rage, were said to be his chosen warriors. But his greatest promise to the warrior was Valhalla. This was Odin's great hall in Asgard, where the souls of the bravest warriors who died in battle, the Einherjar, were brought by the Valkyries. In Valhalla, these chosen warriors would spend their days fighting and their nights feasting, drinking mead served by beautiful Valkyries, all in preparation for the final battle, Ragnarok. This belief was a powerful psychological tool. It removed the fear of death for a warrior. To die in battle was not an end, it was a promotion. It was the ultimate honor, a ticket to an eternal afterlife of glory and feasting at the side of the All-Father himself. This is why a Viking might charge into a shield wall with a smile on his face. He was not seeking death, he was seeking an invitation. Odin, with his one eye, his ravens Hugin, thought, and Munin, memory, and his relentless pursuit of power, was the divine reflection of the Viking Jarl. Cunning, ambitious, learned, and utterly ruthless. While Odin was the god of kings and poets, the average Viking farmer or fisherman had a much more personal relationship with a different deity, Thor. If Odin was the brooding, intellectual CEO of Asgard, Thor was the burly, honest, and immensely popular head of security. He was the god of thunder, the protector of Midgard, the realm of humans, and the eternal enemy of the giants, the forces of chaos that constantly threatened to destroy the world. Thor was everything the common man valued: strong, brave, loyal, and straightforward. He wasn't a god of riddles and dark magic. He was a god of action. He rode across the sky in a chariot pulled by 2 goats, and the sound of his chariot's wheels was the thunder. His weapon was Mjolnir, the mighty hammer, which, when thrown, would always return to his hand. Mjolnir was not just a weapon of destruction, it was a tool of sanctification. It was used to bless births, weddings, and funerals. Thor was a protector. While Odin concerned himself with the fates of kings and the grand sweep of cosmic events, Thor was on the ground, defending humanity from monsters, giants, and chaos. He was relatable. The sagas are filled with tales of his adventures, which are often as comedic as they are heroic. He gets drunk, he gets into brawls, he once dressed up as the goddess Freya to retrieve his stolen hammer. He had a prodigious appetite and a short temper. He was, in many ways, an idealized version of the Viking common man himself. Powerful, but not always graceful. Heroic, but with human-like flaws. This is why his symbol, the hammer Mjolnir, became one of the most popular amulets in the Viking world. Small hammers, made of silver or iron, were worn around the neck as symbols of protection, strength, and faith. In a world filled with real dangers, raids, famine, disease, praying to Thor was a plea for protection. It was a request for a strong arm to stand between your farmstead and the destructive forces of the world. While a warrior might hope to be chosen by Odin for Valhalla, the farmer would pray to Thor for a good harvest, for the safety of his family, and for the strength to endure another harsh winter. Thor was the people's god, the divine champion of the everyday struggle for survival. In the grand cosmic drama of Norse mythology, if Odin represents order and Thor represents protection, then Loki represents the terrifying, exhilarating, and absolutely necessary force of chaos. Loki is the most complex and fascinating figure in the Norse pantheon. He is not a straightforward villain. He is the trickster, the shapeshifter, the agent of change, and the catalyst for almost every major event, good and bad. Loki is an outsider. He is the son of giants, the enemies of the gods, but he was welcomed into Asgard by Odin, becoming his blood brother. This dual nature is the key to his character. He walks between worlds, belonging to none, and therefore he is loyal to nothing but his own whims and intellect. He is handsome, charming, and silver-tongued. His mind is sharper than any sword. He can solve problems that stump the other gods, often because he was the one who created the problem in the first place. It was Loki who tricked a dwarf into forging Thor's hammer, Odin's spear, and Freya's magic ship. But it was also Loki who, out of pure malice, orchestrated the death of Balder, the most beloved of the gods, an act that sets in motion the events leading to Ragnarok. Loki's role is to challenge the status quo, to expose the hypocrisy and foolishness of the gods. He is the divine loose cannon. He can change his shape, becoming a salmon, a fly, a mare. He is the father of monstrous children, the great wolf Fenrir, who will devour Odin at Ragnarok, Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, who will kill and be killed by Thor, and Hel, the half-dead queen of the underworld. He is a force of entropy, the crack in the foundation of the world. But the Vikings did not see chaos as purely evil. It was a necessary part of the cosmic cycle. Without change, there is stagnation. Without challenge, there is no growth. Loki, for all his malevolence, drives the story forward. He forces the gods to be clever, to be brave, to confront their own limitations. He is the embodiment of the unpredictable nature of life itself. A sudden storm, a failed harvest, a betrayal from a trusted friend. That is the work of Loki. He is a reminder that the world is not a safe, orderly place. It is wild, dangerous, and full of tricks. The gods themselves are not immune, And at the end of all things, at Ragnarök, it will be Loki who leads the forces of chaos against the gods in the final, world-shattering battle. He is the beginning of the end, the beautiful, brilliant, and terrifying mind that will bring the age of the gods to a fiery close. The world of the Vikings was not just one of swords and longships. It was a world steeped in mysticism, where the veil between the physical and the spiritual was thin. Their connection to this other world was maintained through rituals, symbols, and a form of magic known as cider, all guided by the mysterious power of the runes. Runes were more than just an alphabet. The runic script, the futak, was a system of writing, yes, but each rune also held a deep symbolic meaning. They represented concepts like wealth, strength, ice, the sun, and the gods themselves. To carve a rune was not just to write a letter, it was to invoke a power. Runes were used for practical purposes, like marking property or memorializing the dead on runestones. But they were also used for divination and magic. A warrior might carve the Tiwaz rune, the rune of the god Tyr, onto his sword for victory in battle. A farmer might use the Jera rune for a good harvest. Casting runes, a form of divination, involved drawing carved pieces of wood or stone and interpreting their meaning to glimpse the future or gain insight into a problem. At the heart of Norse ritual was the blot, the sacrifice. This was a communal event, usually held at a chieftain's hall or a sacred grove. Animals, typically horses, cattle, or pigs, were sacrificed to the gods. The blood was collected in bowls and sprinkled on the participants and the walls of the hall, an act of consecration and communion with the divine. The meat was then cooked and shared in a great feast. The blot was a way to honor the gods, to thank them for their blessings, and to ask for their continued favor. It was a renewal of the bond between the human community and the cosmic forces that governed their lives. And then there was cider, a powerful and often feared form of Norse magic. It was a shamanistic practice, primarily associated with women, called völur, singular vulva. A vulva could enter a trance state to communicate with spirits, predict the future, and influence the fates of others. The practice involved chanting, drumming, and sitting on a high platform while others sang to help induce the trance. Cider was a double-edged sword. It was incredibly powerful, but it was also considered somewhat unmanly for men to practice, as it involved a form of spiritual receptivity seen as feminine. Even Odin, the master of magic, was sometimes derided for his knowledge of cider. These rituals and mystical practices show a side of the Vikings that is often overlooked. They were not just pragmatic warriors. They were a people deeply engaged with the mysteries of the universe, constantly seeking to understand and influence the invisible forces that shape their world. In a society often defined by the will of powerful jarls and the fury of individual warriors, the Vikings had a surprisingly organized system of law and governance. The Thing. This was not a building. It was an event. The Thing was the local assembly of all free men in a community, and it was the cornerstone of Norse political and social life. It was a place where laws were recited, disputes were settled, and justice, in its raw and public form, was dispensed. Things were held in the open air, often at a sacred site marked by stones or a mound. Everyone had the right to speak, but the proceedings were guided by a law speaker, a respected individual who had memorized the entire legal code of the region. Since laws were not written down in books, the law speaker's memory was the ultimate legal authority. He would recite a portion of the law at each assembly, ensuring that the oral tradition was passed down, and that everyone knew their rights and obligations. The thing was the Viking version of a courtroom, a parliament, and a town hall, all rolled into one. If you had a dispute with your neighbour over a piece of land, you brought it to the thing. If you were accused of theft, you defended yourself at the thing. The verdict was decided not by a single judge, but by a panel of chieftains or a vote of the assembled free men. Justice was a communal affair. Punishments were often based on a system of fines. If you were found guilty, you would be ordered to pay compensation to the injured party. But for the most serious crimes, murder, treason, or breaking a sacred oath, the punishment was far more severe. Outlawry. To be declared an outlaw was a social death sentence. You were cast out of the community, your property was forfeit, and you were no longer protected by the law. Anyone could kill you without penalty. You were a vagar I veum, a wolf in a holy place, a man with no home, no kin, and no future. The thing was also a major social event. People travelled for days to attend. It was a time for trading, for arranging marriages, for sharing news, and for feasting. It was the glue that held Norse society together, a system that balanced the rights of the individual with the needs of the community. It was a raw, often brutal form of democracy, but it was their own. It ensured that even the most powerful Jarl was subject to the law, and that every free man, at least in theory, had a voice in his own destiny. Let's clear up a common misconception. The Vikings were not the filthy, unkempt barbarians often portrayed in movies. In fact, compared to many other European cultures of the time, they were remarkably clean and well-groomed. Personal hygiene and appearance were incredibly important in Norse society, not just for health, but as a sign of status, self-respect, and even magical protection. Archaeological digs at Viking sites have unearthed a surprising number of personal grooming tools. The most common finds are combs, usually made from bone or antler, often intricately carved. A Viking would have carried a comb with them, using it daily to keep their hair and beard neat and free of lice. A well-groomed beard was a sign of manliness and pride. Tweezers, also a common find, were used for plucking stray hairs. Small spoon-like objects have been identified as ear scoops, for cleaning wax from the ears. They were, in short, obsessed with personal tidiness. Bathing was also a regular practice. The sagas frequently mention the importance of washing before meals, before attending the thing, and as a general weekly ritual. The Saturday, in Scandinavian languages, is still called lørdag or lørdag, which derives from the Old Norse word laugardagar, meaning washing day. They would bathe in cold streams or use saunas, a practice they likely picked up in their travels to the east. They would use simple soaps made from animal fat and ash, and they would scrub their skin with rough cloths. Their hair was a particular point of pride. Both men and women wore their hair long. Men often had long beards, which were sometimes braided or decorated with beads. Women wore their hair in elaborate braids and knots, sometimes held in place with beautiful pins of bronze or silver. Blonde hair was particularly prized, and some Vikings, both men and women, were known to use a strong soap with a high lye content to bleach their hair. This not only lightened their hair, but also helped to kill head lice. They also cared about their clothes. While the average farmer wore simple, undyed wool, wealthier Vikings wore clothes of brightly coloured fabrics, dyed with expensive pigments from plants and minerals. They wore fine jewellery, arm rings, necklaces and brooches made of silver and gold, often decorated with intricate patterns. These were not just ornaments, they were a way to display wealth and status. An Arab traveller, Ibn Fadlan, who met a group of Rus Vikings, was disgusted by some of their habits, but noted with surprise that they were meticulous about combing their hair and washing every day. So, while their world was certainly brutal and often dirty, the Vikings themselves were anything but. They were a people who understood that looking good was a part of living well, even if living well also involved the occasional axe battle. A feast in a Viking Jarl's great hall was more than just a meal. It was a political and social spectacle, a ritual that reinforced bonds, displayed wealth, and cemented power. The great hall itself was the heart of the community, a long, smoky, fire-lit space that felt both like a fortress and a cathedral. As a guest, you would be seated on long wooden benches according to your status. The closer you were to the Jarl and his high seat, the more important you were. To be seated at the far end, near the door, was a sign of low rank. The air would be thick with the smell of roasting meat, wood smoke, and unwashed warriors. The centerpiece of the feast was the food, and it was a display of abundance. A whole roasted pig or ox might be turning on a spit over the central fire. There would be cauldrons of rich stew, filled with meat, root vegetables, and herbs. There would be platters of smoked and salted fish, bowls of hard cheeses, and mounds of dark, heavy bread. This was not a time for meagre portions. To be a generous host was a sign of a powerful leader. And then there was the drink. The drink was the lifeblood of the feast. Horns and wooden cups were kept constantly full of ale, a thick, hearty brew made from barley. And for the most important guests, mead. Mead was a sweet, potent wine made from honey, and it was the drink of kings and gods. Toasts were made, loud and boastful. They drank to the gods, to the Jarl, to past victories, and to future raids. As the night wore on and the drink flowed, the atmosphere would grow louder and more boisterous. This was when the Skald, the court poet, would take centre stage. The Skald was a highly respected figure, a master of complex poetic forms and kennings. Metaphorical phrases like whale road for the sea or battle sweat for blood. He would recite long epic poems, the sagas, telling tales of heroic ancestors, mythical beasts, and great battles. His performance was not just entertainment. It was a living history, a way of preserving the tribe's identity and inspiring the warriors to deeds of their own. Feasts were also a time for business. Oaths were sworn, alliances were forged, and gifts were exchanged. A Jarl would reward his loyal warriors with gifts of silver arm rings, swords, and land. This act of gift-giving was a crucial part of the social contract, binding the warrior to his lord in a web of loyalty and obligation. But a feast could also be a dangerous place. Drunken arguments could easily escalate into bloody brawls. Old rivalries could resurface, and a single insult could lead to a challenge and a duel to the death. The feast was a microcosm of Viking life itself, a celebration of abundance, honor, and community, all lived under the constant, simmering threat of violence. While many Vikings sought their fortune through raiding in the west, others turned their gaze eastward, down the great rivers of what is now Russia and Ukraine. These were the Russ, the Swedish Vikings who became traders, mercenaries, and eventually the founding rulers of a new nation. Their journey led them to the glittering, impossibly wealthy heart of the medieval world, Constantinople, which they called Miklagard, the great city. To a Viking from the cold, dark north, Constantinople was a vision of unimaginable splendor. It was a city of marble palaces, golden domed churches, and markets overflowing with silk, spices, and treasures from across the globe. It was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, the last remnant of Rome, and its emperor was the most powerful man in the Christian world. The Vikings who arrived here were not just raiders. They were shrewd merchants. They traded slaves, furs, amber, and honey for the luxuries of the East. But they also came as warriors for hire. The Byzantine emperors, constantly beset by enemies, recognized the fighting prowess of these barbarians from the north. They began to recruit them as elite mercenaries. This was the birth of the Varangian Guard. The Varangian Guard was the personal bodyguard of the Byzantine emperor. To be a member was to hold one of the most prestigious and lucrative positions a warrior could hope for. They were paid in gold, given the finest weapons and armor, and granted access to the highest levels of imperial power. The Guard was famous for its fierce loyalty, its towering physical presence, and its terrifying effectiveness in battle. They wielded the signature Viking weapon, the great two-handed axe, with such skill that they became a symbol of the emperor's power. To be a Varangian was to walk the corridors of the imperial palace, to stand guard over the emperor himself, and to be the last line of defense for the greatest city on earth. Many famous Vikings served in the Guard. The most legendary was Harald Sigurdsson, later known as Harald Hardrada. He spent years in the Guard, fighting in Sicily, Bulgaria, and the Holy Land. He amassed an enormous fortune, which he had shipped back to Scandinavia, and he used this wealth to eventually claim the throne of Norway. The story of the Varangian Guard is a testament to the Vikings' adaptability. They were not just mindless destroyers. They were explorers, traders, and soldiers of fortune who could navigate the complex politics of a foreign empire as skillfully as they could navigate the open sea. They came to Constantinople as barbarians from the north, and they became the trusted protectors of an emperor, their axes and their oaths echoing through the marble halls of the great city. In the mid-9th century, the nature of Viking activity in England changed dramatically. The era of sporadic, hit-and-run raids was over. A new phase began, one of coordinated invasion, conquest, and settlement. This was the age of the Great Heathen Army, a massive coalition of Norse warriors that descended upon the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms like a biblical plague. The army was not a single, unified force, but a collection of warbands led by various chieftains, many of them the sons of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok, including Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan, and Ubba. They came not just to loot, but to avenge their father's death and to carve out kingdoms for themselves on English soil. The army landed in East Anglia in 865, and, unlike previous raiding parties, they did not leave. They spent the winter acquiring horses and transforming themselves from a seafaring force into a highly mobile land army. What followed was a decade of terror and conquest. In 866, they marched north and captured the great city of York, the capital of Northumbria. They then turned their attention to Mercia and East Anglia, systematically defeating the Anglo-Saxon armies and killing their kings. King Edmund of East Anglia was reportedly tied to a tree, shot full of arrows, and then beheaded, becoming a martyr and a saint. The great heathen army was unlike anything the Anglo-Saxons had ever faced. It was large, it was relentless, and it was led by brilliant and ruthless strategists like Ivar the Boneless. They were masters of psychological warfare, using terror to break the will of their enemies. The only kingdom that managed to resist them was Wessex, in the south, led by King Alfred the Great. The struggle between Alfred and the great heathen army would define the future of England. For years, it seemed as though the Vikings would conquer the entire island. They established a vast territory known as the Danelaw, where Norse law and customs prevailed. They settled the land, became farmers and traders, and forever changed the cultural and linguistic landscape of England. The great heathen army was a turning point. It marked the moment when the Vikings stopped being just raiders and became nation builders. They came as a storm of destruction, but they stayed and planted roots, their legacy etched into the very soil of the land they had come to conquer. There is no name more synonymous with the Viking Age than Ragnar Lothbrok. He is the archetypal Viking hero, a fearless warrior, a cunning king, and an explorer who sailed to unknown lands. But was he real? The answer is a frustrating, fascinating maybe. Ragnar exists in a blurry space between history and myth, a figure so legendary that separating the man from the saga is nearly impossible. The historical record for his existence is thin. There are mentions of a Viking leader named Reginherus who sacked Paris in 845, and this figure is often identified with Ragnar. But most of what we know comes from the Norse sagas, particularly the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok and the tale of Ragnar's sons. These were written centuries after his supposed life, and they are not history books. They are epic literature, designed to entertain, inspire, and legitimize the claims of his descendants. According to the sagas, Ragnar's story is one of larger-than-life adventure. His nickname, Lothbrok, or Hairy Breeches, comes from a tale where he wore breeches made of fur, boiled in pitch, to protect himself while fighting a dragon or a giant serpent to win the hand of a princess. He is said to have raided far and wide, fathering many famous sons with his two legendary wives, the shield maiden Lagertha and the cunning queen Aslaug. His most famous exploits are his raids on England and France, but his end is what truly cemented his legend. The sagas tell that he was shipwrecked on the coast of Northumbria and captured by King Ella. Defiant to the end, Ragnar was thrown into a pit of vipers. As he died, he is said to have laughed, proclaiming that his sons would avenge him. And avenge him they did. His death became the catalyst for the invasion of the great heathen army, led by his sons, who came to England to make Ella pay in the most brutal way imaginable, the Blood Eagle. Whether this is true history is debatable. Many scholars believe Ragnar was not a single person, but a composite figure, a blend of several historical Viking heroes whose deeds were combined into one epic narrative. He is the embodiment of the Viking ideal. But real or not, Ragnar's impact is undeniable. He became the ultimate Viking hero, a symbol of courage, ambition, and glorious defiance in the face of death. He is the ghost that haunts the Viking Age, a man so powerful that his story, whether fact or fiction, launched an invasion that would change the course of English history forever. If Ragnar Lothbrok was the mythic father, then his son, Ivar the Boneless, was the chillingly real and brutally effective strategist who brought his father's legend to life. Ivar is not a figure of heroic, dragon-slaying fantasy. He is a historical figure, a leader of the great heathen army, and one of the most cunning and ruthless military commanders of the Viking Age. The most enduring mystery about Ivar is his nickname, the Boneless. What did it mean? The sagas offer several theories. One is that he suffered from a physical condition, perhaps a form of osteogenesis imperfecta, brittle bone disease, that made his legs weak or useless. In this version, he was carried into battle on a shield, directing his warriors with his brilliant mind rather than his physical strength. Another theory suggests boneless was a metaphor for his sexual impotence, or perhaps a reference to his incredible flexibility and snake-like cunning. Some even speculate it was a mistranslation of a name meaning the hated. Whatever the origin, the name adds to his enigmatic and terrifying persona. Ivar was the mastermind behind the great heathen army's invasion of England in 865. While his brothers might have been the muscle, Ivar was the brain. He was a master of strategy and psychological warfare. He understood that victory was not just won with axes, but with fear. His conquest of Northumbria and the capture of York was a brilliant military operation. But it was his vengeance on King Ella, the man who killed his father, that became the stuff of dark legend. According to the sagas, Ivar captured Ella and subjected him to the Blodern, the blood eagle. This was a horrific ritual execution where the victims' ribs were severed from the spine and their lungs pulled out to create a pair of bloody wings. While modern historians debate whether the blood eagle was a real practice or a literary invention to emphasize Viking cruelty, the story itself illustrates Ivar's reputation for absolute ruthlessness. Unlike many Viking leaders who sought to carve out a kingdom for themselves, Ivar's ambitions seem to lie elsewhere. After his victories in England, he left the command of the army to his brothers and moved on to Ireland, where he founded a dynasty that would rule Dublin for many years. He died, not in a blaze of glory on a battlefield, but of a sudden and hideous disease, according to an Irish chronicle. Ivar the Boneless was a new kind of Viking leader. He was not just a warrior, he was a general, a politician, and a dynasty builder. He replaced brute force with strategy, and hot-headed rage with cold, calculating cruelty. He was the mind behind the storm that nearly washed away the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. A chilling testament to the fact that the most dangerous weapon a Viking could wield was not an axe, but a brilliant, merciless intellect. The Viking Age did not end with a single battle or a final raid. It faded slowly and unevenly as the world that had created it transformed. The storm that had raged across Europe for 3 centuries finally began to calm, not because the Vikings were defeated, but because they evolved. What brought about this change? A combination of powerful forces. First, the rise of centralized kingdoms in Scandinavia itself. The age of petty jarls and independent warbands gave way to powerful kings in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. These new monarchs, like Harald Bluetooth of Denmark, consolidated power, created national armies, and began to behave more like their European counterparts. Raiding was suppressed in favor of organized trade and diplomacy. A king could not control a kingdom if his best warriors were constantly sailing off to loot foreign lands. Second, the influence of Christianity was profound and transformative. As Vikings settled in places like England, France, and Russia, they slowly converted to the faith of their new neighbours. Christian missionaries also made their way into Scandinavia, converting kings and commoners alike. Christianity brought with it a different worldview, one that did not glorify dying in battle for Odin. It brought literacy, a connection to the wider European culture, and a moral framework that was at odds with the old pagan ways. By the 11th century, Scandinavia was largely Christian, and the old gods had retreated into folklore. The world around them had also changed. The kingdoms of Europe were no longer the fragmented, easy targets they had been in the 9th century. They had developed stronger armies, built castles and fortified towns, and learned how to defend themselves against Viking attacks. The age of easy plunder was over. The symbolic end of the Viking Age is often dated to 1066. In that fateful year, two great invasions of England took place. The first was led by Harald Hardrada, the King of Norway, a man often called the last great Viking. He was defeated and killed at the Battle of Stamford Bridge by the English army. Just a few weeks later, another descendant of Vikings, William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, invaded and won the Battle of Hastings. The Viking Age had come full circle. The descendants of the raiders who had terrorized Europe were now the crowned kings of Christian kingdoms. The longships were replaced by castles. The old gods were replaced by Christ, and the warrior's axe was replaced by the king's scepter. The storm had passed, leaving behind a new world that the Vikings themselves had helped to create. Though the age of raids and longships is long over, the ghost of the Viking continues to haunt the modern world. Their legacy is not just one of buried treasure and rune stones. It is etched into our language, our geography, our DNA, and our very idea of what it means to be a warrior. The most immediate legacy is in the English language. When the Vikings of the Danelaw settled in England, they brought their language, Old Norse, with them. It mingled with Old English, and hundreds of common words we use today are of Norse origin. Words like sky, skin, leg, window, husband, egg, and knife are all Viking imports. Even the word law itself comes from Old Norse. Their influence is also written on the map. Thousands of place names in northern and eastern England end in dash by dash, farmstead dash, like in Grimsby dash, dash Thorpe, dash village dash, or dash Thwaite dash clearing. These are the linguistic fossils of Viking settlements, a map of where they lived, farmed, and put down roots. The genetic legacy is also undeniable. DNA studies have shown a significant Scandinavian component in the populations of the British Isles, Iceland, and the regions of Normandy and Russia where Vikings settled. The raiders and traders left more than just stories behind. They left their children. But perhaps the most powerful legacy is the romanticized image of the Viking in modern culture. Beginning in the 19th century, a Viking revival swept through Europe. Artists, poets, and composers rediscovered the sagas and reimagined the Vikings not as brutal slavers, but as noble savages, symbols of freedom, adventure, and a fierce, untamed spirit. This is where the myth of the horned helmet was born, an invention to make them look more dramatic and demonic on the opera stage. Today, that romantic image is everywhere. In movies, television shows, video games, and heavy metal music, The Viking is an icon of rebellion, strength, and raw, masculine power. We are drawn to their aesthetic, the beards, the braids, the axes, the ships. We are fascinated by their mythology, the brooding Odin, the mighty Thor, the apocalyptic Ragnarok. We have, in many ways, tamed the Viking, turning the terrifying raider into a heroic adventurer. We have sanded off the rough edges, forgetting the slavery, the brutality, and the terror they inflicted. We have kept the legend but discarded the grim reality. And in doing so, we have created a modern myth, a Viking of our own making, a figure who is part warrior, part explorer, and part rock star. We began our journey in chains, a thrall captured in a brutal raid, sold like livestock, and stripped of all humanity. We experienced the life of a slave in the Viking Age, a world of backbreaking labour, constant hunger, and the soul-crushing reality of being someone else's property. We felt the cold of the longhouse floor, the sting of the master's hand, and the utter despair of a life without hope. This was the dark, ugly engine that powered the Viking world, a truth often buried beneath the more glorious tales of exploration and conquest. But our journey did not end there. We stepped out of the slave's tunic and into the world of the free. We saw the life of the Carl, the farmer whose existence was a constant struggle against the land. We stood in the great hall of the Jarl, where power, poetry, and violence mingled in the firelight. We sailed on the magnificent longships, those technological marvels that were both tools of terror and vessels of discovery. We explored their complex and contradictory worldview. We met their gods, the wise and ruthless Odin, the protective and beloved Thor, the chaotic and brilliant Loki. We saw how their belief in Valhalla and a glorious death fueled a culture of extraordinary bravery and terrifying violence. We saw them not just as raiders, but as explorers who settled Iceland and reached the shores of North America. We saw them as traders and mercenaries in the glittering city of Constantinople. We saw them as conquerors who brought the kingdoms of England to their knees. And finally, we saw them transform, their age of fire and fury slowly giving way to an age of kingdoms and Christianity. The Viking story is one of stark, uncomfortable dualities. They were slavers and explorers. They were poets and killers. They were creators of beautiful art and perpetrators of unspeakable cruelty. They built societies based on law and community, all while fueling their economy with the theft of human lives. To remember only the heroes, the Ragnars and the Harald Hardradas, is to tell only half the story. To forget the unnamed thrall shivering in the longhouse is to ignore the foundation upon which their entire world was built. The true legacy of the Vikings is not a simple tale of adventure. It is a complex, often brutal, and deeply human story about the enduring struggle for power, freedom, and a place in the world. A struggle that was won by some on the backs of many. You are no longer a person. You are an asset, a piece of walking, breathing currency. Your worth is calculated in silver, in bolts of silk, in the number of fields you can plough before you collapse. The Viking raid that tore you from your home was not an act of random violence. It was a business transaction, and you are the product. The slave trade was the beating, bleeding heart of the Viking economy. It funded the expeditions, built the great halls, and adorned the Jarl's wives in foreign jewellery. While furs, amber, and walrus ivory were valuable commodities, nothing was as versatile or as profitable as human beings. The primary source of slaves was raiding. The Vikings' swift, terrifying longship attacks on the coasts of England, Ireland, France, and beyond were specifically designed to capture people. They targeted monasteries, villages, and towns, overwhelming them with speed and ferocity, taking the young and healthy while leaving the old and infirm to die. These captives, like you, were the spoils of war, divided among the warriors as their share of the profits. Once captured, you entered a vast international network of human trafficking. You might be taken back to Scandinavia to work on a farm as a domestic servant or as a labourer building ships and fortifications. Or you might be sold at one of the great slave markets in towns like Dublin, Hedeby, or even further east. The Rus Vikings, who travelled the rivers of Russia, took Slavic captives down to the great markets of the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic caliphates. A healthy young man could be sold for a small fortune in Constantinople. A beautiful young woman could fetch an even higher price in the markets of Baghdad. Your fate was determined by market forces. A strong man, skilled in carpentry, might be worth more than a dozen unskilled labourers. A woman who could weave fine cloth was a valuable asset. Your price was a cold, hard calculation of your utility. And the trade was brutal. Slaves were often chained together in coffles, marched for miles, or packed into the holds of ships like any other cargo. Many died on the journey from disease, malnutrition, or despair. Their deaths were logged as a simple loss of inventory. This economic reality is crucial to understanding the Viking mindset. They were not driven by a mindless bloodlust. They were driven by a pragmatic, ruthless, and highly organized pursuit of wealth. The suffering they caused was not the goal. It was a byproduct, a necessary externality in the business of building an empire. You are not a victim of their rage. You are a casualty of their ambition. The Vikings were masters of branding long before the concept existed. Their reputation for ferocity was their greatest weapon, a tool they cultivated and deployed with terrifying skill. This was not just about being violent. It was about performing violence in a way that shattered an enemy's will to resist. At the core of this was the berserker. These were not just skilled warriors. They were psychological shock troops. Before a battle, they would work themselves into a frenzied state, a berserker gang. They would howl like wolves, bite the rims of their shields, and shed their armour, fighting in nothing but a bearskin or wolfskin shirt. They were said to be immune to pain, filled with a strength that was more than human. Imagine being an Anglo-Saxon farmer, standing in a shield wall and seeing a dozen of these howling, half-naked madmen charging directly at you, seemingly impervious to wounds. The sheer terror would be enough to break your line before the first axe was even swung. Historians debate the source of this fury. Was it a shamanistic trance, a battle hypnosis, the ingestion of hallucinogenic mushrooms like Amanita muscaria, or simply a well-rehearsed and terrifying act of theatre? The answer is likely a combination of all of them, but the effect was undeniable. The berserkers were the living embodiment of the Viking war machine, uncontrollable, inhuman, and utterly terrifying. This performance of ferocity extended to their battle tactics. The Vikings used fear as a weapon. They would often strike at dawn, appearing out of the mist like ghosts. They would use war horns and terrifying battle cries to create an atmosphere of chaos and panic. Their reputation preceded them. After the first few devastating raids, the mere sight of a longship's sail on the horizon was enough to send entire villages fleeing into the hills. And if they captured a particularly important enemy, they would make an example of them. The ritual of the blood eagle, whether real or literary, serves this purpose perfectly. It is a story designed to communicate absolute, horrifying dominance. It says, "This is what happens to those who defy us." The Vikings understood that a battle is won in the mind before it is won on the field. By branding themselves as unstoppable forces of nature, as the favoured sons of a war god, they created an aura of invincibility. They were not just fighting armies, they were fighting the human capacity for hope. And for many years, they were winning. Your world has shrunk to the size of your master's farm. Your future has been erased. But what of the world your captors inhabit? Their social structure is as rigid and unforgiving as their climate. At the top are the jarls, the chieftains, and kings. They are the landowners, the warlords, the men who command fleets and host great feasts. Their power comes from their wealth, their lineage, and the number of warriors sworn to their service. They live in the largest longhouses, wear the finest clothes, and drink the sweetest mead. They are the architects of the Viking age. Below them are the carls, the free men. This is the largest and most varied class. It includes everyone from a prosperous farmer with his own land and a few thralls, to a landless blacksmith, to a young warrior seeking his fortune on a raid. A carl is defined by his freedom. He can own property, speak at the thing, and is protected by the law. His honor is his most valuable possession, and he will defend it with his life. This is the class that form the backbone of Viking armies and society. And then, at the very bottom, there is you, the thrall. You are outside the system of honor and law. You are the invisible foundation upon which the entire structure is built. Your labor frees up the carl to train for war. Your capture provides the jarl with the wealth to maintain his power. The entire society is a pyramid, and you are the stone being crushed at its base. Social mobility is limited, but not impossible. A successful carl, through raiding and wise trading, could accumulate enough wealth and followers to become a jarl himself. The sagas are full of such stories, of men who rose from obscurity to greatness through their own deeds. This possibility, however slim, was a powerful motivator. It fueled the ambition that drove the longships across the sea. But for a thrall, there is no ladder to climb. You can only look up from the bottom of the pit and see a world that is not, and never will be, your own. The jarl feasts, the carl farms, and the thrall bleeds. This is the unwritten law of the Viking world, the harsh, tripartite structure that dictates the fate of every person from the moment they are born, or, in your case, from the moment you are captured. Let's imagine, for a moment, a different fate. You were not captured in the raid. Instead, you were born into the world of the Vikings, but not as a slave. You are the daughter of a carl, a free farmer. Your life is not one of chains, but it is still one of hard work and strict limitations. From a young age, your life is shaped by your expected role. You learn the skills of the household, not as a slave, but as a future mistress of your own farm. You learn to spin wool, to weave cloth on the upright loom, to cook, to bake, to brew ale, and to preserve food for the long winter. These are not hobbies. They are essential survival skills. You do not attend the thing. You do not train for war. Your domain is the household. However, Norse women had significantly more rights than their counterparts in many other parts of Europe. You can inherit property. You can run the farm if your husband is away, raiding or trading, and he is often away. You can request a divorce if your husband is abusive, lazy, or unable to provide for the family. You are not his property. You are his partner in a legal and practical sense. Your marriage will be arranged. It is a contract between two families designed to forge alliances, combine resources, and secure the future. Love is a secondary consideration, if it is considered at all. Your father will negotiate your dowry, and you will be married, likely in your mid-teens, to a man you may barely know. Your value to your new family is measured in your ability to manage a household, and most importantly, to produce children, especially sons. Childbirth is a dangerous affair. Many women die. If you survive, you become the husfreyja, the lady of the house, and you will wear the keys to the food stores at your waist as a symbol of your authority. But your life is always precarious. You live in a violent world. Your husband, your sons, your brothers, they may not return from their next sea voyage. You must be prepared to defend your home, not with a sword, but with your wits, your resilience, and your unwavering strength. Your life is not one of freedom in the modern sense, but it is one of dignity and respect. You are not a warrior, but you are a survivor, the strong, steady anchor that allows the Viking world to function.